Welcome to the Indian Gaming Association's The New Normal webcast. My name is Lisa Johnson. I'm the conference manager for the Indian Gaming Trade Show and Convention. I'd like to share a few housekeeping tips before we get started. Everyone is muted by default except for our speakers. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the chat box and they'll be brought up at the end. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Victor Rocha, conference chairman of the Indian Gaming Association.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the New Normal, your go-to source for insightful discussions on the gaming industry and critical issues impacting Native American tribes across the United States. I'm Victor Rocha, and joining me is my co-host Jason Giles, Executive Director of the Indian Gaming Association. Today we have a special webinar. We're talking to welcome our dear friend, the legendary and award-winning journalist Mark Trahant, and our boss and glorious leader, Chairman Ernest Stevens. There he is. Chairman, welcome. Mark, welcome. And so listen, we've as we started this webinar, Jason, 5 years ago, almost 5 years ago, um, to bring a little understanding to a very crazy situation, which was in the middle of the pandemic. We were everything was shut down. We didn't know what was happening. There was all this uncertainty in Indian country. And, when we started, I felt that it was important that we provide a place where people can hear, some sanity, you know what I mean? Because there was a lot of insanity going on. And so, I think we're at that point again. We're now into the third week of President Trump's second term. We've seen some really crazy things, but let's discuss it and let's talk about what we know and let's talk and first of all, Mark, welcome. How are
Thank
you
you.
doing? Where are you at? Are you in Arizona? Is that where you're
I
at
am in
now?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Good. Mark had an amazing road trip. I don't know if you guys follow him on social media, but he was in all over Europe and that was how long were you gone? About a month?
Almost, yeah.
Wow. Wow. That's way too long for me, man. I'm like 2 weeks is the max I'm gone and then I come back home. Chairman Stevens, welcome. I see that you are in Washington, D.C., which seems like a great place to be right now.
Yeah, I don't know if I call it great, but it's the right place for
The
sure.
right
Uh,
place.
yeah,
Sure, for
and
sure.
great in terms of weather. It's a little overcast today, but yesterday the weather was perfect. And I pulled out of my driveway, leaving Oneida, Wisconsin, and it was full. And then on the, these new technology, they got a ring that you can set up in your. So I get to watch my front yard anytime I want. So I watched my wife shovel all that snow the other day from Washington D.C.
There you go. Put another log on the fire, right? Was that country song, right?
Oh yeah, my wife is an Indian lady from the res. She don't wait for nobody.
Those ring doorbells are insane, man. I think they're one of the best inventions. I mean, who knew that many people walk up to my front door when I'm trying to nap or something like that? It's pretty insane. But speaking, let's Mark, let's talk about the administration. What do we know so far? Um, what have been the biggest policy shifts, man? What are you seeing? Let's besides everything.
Right. Well,
And how does it relate to us? Most importantly, how does it relate to us?
I think the most important policy consideration to think about is chaos. That they're throwing so much out there so fast. They have no idea which ones will be held up, which ones will be struck down, which ones will have to see another light of day. And that chaos is defining this moment. And I think the real challenge for both journalists and for tribal governments is not to chase every one of those because there's going to be so many, the frenetic energy is over the charts. And it's going to be important to pull back and figure out which ones are important, which ones have a plausible pathway, and challenge the ones that need to be challenged in a really thoughtful way rather than just reacting to everything.
I agree, but you do have, letters that are sent out to federal employees that say, click here. And these guys have been taught not to answer emails. I mean, didn't the Podesta thing teach us anything about emails? And so, for Indian country, where I see a lot of uncertainty right now is they're talking about the Department of Education, dismantling the Department of Education. How would that affect Indian country, Mark?
Well, I mean, it would be dramatic. First of all, we haven't even figured out yet what this means for the institutions run by the federal government, whether it's the Institute for American Indian Arts or Haskell Indian Nations University. How would that play into any kind of rethinking of the federal education role? Are they considered DEI programs? If they are, do they get eliminated just from that? I mean, one of the things that's striking about the latest federal employee situation is that anybody who attended a DEI seminar is on the list to be suspended temporarily until they figure this out. Again, chaos is the governing philosophy, and their goal is to reduce significantly the operation of the federal government. I think, and I always look to history for some things like this, and it's true that we've gone through this before. And the last time was what we now call the Gilded Age, and it's when the billionaires of that era took over the government and basically ran things. One of the interesting things about that era is that John Rockefeller and Standard Oil started getting ready to pump oil before the General Allotment Act became law. And it's that same sort of thing you're seeing where the companies involved are looking. I think the primary policy is to extract as many resources as possible, and Indian country is just a waylay on that.
Jason, if you read Project 2025, which I think is very valid for what we're going through, one of the big things they talk about is getting rid of the Department of Interior. What does that mean for Indian country?
Yeah, I mean they want to just let the states run everything back, in their own backyard. But as Mark is saying, history tells us the states are not going to look after tribes unless they're forced to. So that's a chilling prospect there, and we're glad that the Great Plains tribes and everybody, and we sent in letters saying, yeah, Burgum, we like them, but we're definitely gonna have to be wary about how much they're gonna try to either take land out of trust or take restrictions off of reservation land so that they can mine more easily. I don't know. It's going to parks and recreations and national monuments and all that kind of stuff. If that's the way they're going to go, they better give tribes full control of their reservation, and mining companies are not going to just walk in willy-nilly like the oil companies did in Oklahoma and just start taking. I think we've evolved to that point at least, but in terms of the immediacy of all this, we don't really know how fast and how hard they can go and break things without significant pushback. And I think just today you're starting to see significant pushback. If not some of the stuff they're doing, they're going to have to either slow down or pull it back a little. Like even U.S. aid, nobody really knows, and I think most Americans probably don't even care about U.S. aid. But I think there's a lot of farmers that do, because a lot of their excess crops go to U.S. aid, and they're making a living. And the whole U.S. aid food program is just a whole subsidization of our farm industry. And so at some point the Midwest senators are going to start to hear it from their farmers. Hey, I've got all this excess inventory. What are we doing? And are they going to tell them to eat it? You're hearing a lot of Republicans now saying the American public can put up with a little pain for a while. I don't think so. And you just have a bunch of Elon Musk and a bunch of kids running around, which is just probably the most disturbing aspect of this. And they have no background to understand why any of this exists, and they have no forward thinking about the ramifications. So, chairman's here in town. It's next week. NCI is going to be here. He'll be right back here, and we're going around meeting with our congressional folks. And as soon as people get sworn in, we'll start meeting with them, because if anything, we need to show them the importance of what the government actually does and how many people's livelihoods are at risk if you're just going to start chopping the federal workforce and the budget.
Thank you, Jason. Those are really great points. Chairman Stevens, Jason has some really good points here. And it just drives home the point for me again is that, during the pandemic, Chairman, you provided some great leadership. And I think we're at this point again, too, where the leadership is required, someone to stand up and to listen and to take these ideas. What are you hearing at a grassroots level? I don't know anybody more connected than you at a grassroots level, Chairman. What are you hearing?
Well, thank you. I think the grassroots part of me is, starts with mom and grandma and that matriarchal world I live in. We just kind of feel the pulse and get to work, and just when you think you've seen it all during the pandemic, now we're dealing with this. But people aren't dying, and we're not trying to figure out what the world is doing. So I don't think that we have a reason to panic. I think it's important that we're calm and that we're assertive and we're substantive in what we do. We're educators, and we're here on the front line, and that's the most comfortable place I could be right now to try to figure this out. But we won't jump and we won't be angry. We'll be assertive and we'll be intense, but we won't cross the line. And because
hey, Chairman, hang on one second. Lisa, everybody's in the waiting room right now. I see 133 people are in the waiting room.
Yeah, I got a couple calls saying
there they are. Here they come. Here comes everyone. All right, we got to start again.
Start all over.
They're coming in. Sorry about that, everyone.
Welcome to the new normal.
We're finished. Welcome to the new normal. Like everything else, we're talking about chaos. We're talking about uncertainty. We're talking about life in the waiting room.
Old school. Mark Trahant already summed it up.
Mark Trahant, listen, we apologize. We actually started with smoke signal because we figured you guys were tradish. Again, you guys, we apologize. We don't know what happened. I think in this new era of uncertainty, we thought we'd start it off with a little uncertainty for you too. So again, we're sorry about that. Welcome to the new normal. I'm Victor. Jason, we have our dear friend Mark Trahant, who is legendary newsman. And shouldn't you have a cigar and a hat, Mark? You should be like one of those Ben Heck type of newsmen. You know what I mean?
I do have
and
that.
then, of course, the great and illustrious leader, Chairman Ernest Stevens. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to be here from Washington, D.C.
Thank you. So, we're going to start by where we just want, we had no idea you guys were out there waiting. We thought you were just blown away by our conversation, but we just started it. We're talking about uncertainty with the new administration and why it's important that we at the Indian Gaming Association provide some leadership. Mark, let's start with you again. If you could repeat exactly everything that you said before, word for word, and don't miss a beat. It's recorded, so I will be able to tell.
All right,
Mark.
Mark, Mark, what you said about just the comparisons to the late 1800s is we're seeing a version of that with a modern day tech industry. So I think that's a good place to start because frankly, under Biden administration, when we did the NCAI IGA task force, we were worried about ICWA being overturned and all that, but it turned into sort of tribes were bringing us a lot of their other issues. And one of them was, Mark, that, hey, the Biden guys with all this infrastructure stuff are just coming willy-nilly after the lithium, all these minerals, and they're not even asking us. They're just, the Corps of Engineers is just coming and site surveying and setting up plants near our reservation with no discussion on the impact of the water quality and all this other stuff. I mean, what are we seeing now?
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, lithium and all strategic minerals were just kind of a window into let's quickly switch to a new economy without thinking it through. I mentioned that in history, we have a moment where billionaires ran the country. And that was the 1800s. Now we now call it the Gilded Age. And folks like John Jacob Astor and Astoria Hotel, the railroads, the oil companies, John Rockefeller basically ran the country without anyone stopping them. And for Indians, it was particularly a deep, dark moment in history because we started that era with 150 million acres of land under title. And we ended that era with 90 million acres of land. So not just quite half, but it was a really substantial loss. That same era, you think about the parallels are just striking. The Chinese Exclusion Act and the attack on immigration was going on then. States were given control of civil rights in that era. In that era was the whole idea of separate but equal. And that whole mind frame of wealth being the only determinant of a society's progress was just pronounced. And I think, and the one part of this that's so striking is, yes, Project 2025 raised up some of these things, but this is a long-term battle in the United States. It goes back and forth, and really the world, not just the United States, where there are these moments in history where the rich think they get everything. And the good thing for us is that usually out of these times, it precedes something that good comes out of it. For example, after the Gilded Age came the Progressive Era, and the whole idea of the not the Civil Rights Act, the
Self-determination
Reorganization Act,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
the
IRA,
idea of
sorry.
self-government came out of that really destructive moment. And so it's a back and forth, and we're just in a moment where there is a back and forth. One of the things that was said when we were off that I think is really extraordinary, and Jason mentioned it, is this idea that we need to rethink about our allies. And one really important measure is farmers in rural areas are getting hit just as hard as Indian country. Farmers voted in overwhelmingly numbers for Trump. And the two first things he did were the tariffs, which wipe out their sales globally, and the second, USAID, which wipes out the gifts of subsidies. The second part that's hitting rural America really hard is Medicaid. Rural hospitals will not exist without Medicaid dollars. And to have that suddenly be up on the chopping block is going to open up an opportunity for Indian country to have some really strong rural conservative allies.
You know, Jason, it feels like, the white paper vault for every conservative think tank has been opened and everyone is being thrown up against the wall. I think you've seen all these ideological pushes for the private industry to privatize the minerals and stuff like that. You know, one of the things in Project 2025 is the dissolution of the Department of Education and the Department of Interior. And the reason, and we were talking about this in the Interior, was because of mineral extraction and stuff like that. It's really fascinating, the dichotomy there, because you have, Elon Musk with his green energy, and then you have the petroleum people on the other side, but they see this as a moment of weakness. Federal government has never been weaker and more disorganized. But I think one of the important things here that we need to keep in mind is that this really has to be done at the state level. You talk about that, they're going to respond to the large plain tribes when they start talking about the hospitals are gone, education's gone, tribal colleges are going to be affected with the dissolution of the Department of Energy. So I think this goes right back to the state level again, where the tribes, it's very important that you're lobbying, that you're in contact with your senators, your congressmen, your local congressmen. This argument a couple weeks ago in where they talked about immigration, and then they used one of the arguments that the tribes aren't considered citizens of the United States, and if the tribes don't have citizens and an attachment to the country, then what do these foreigners have? Which I think everybody was pretty shocked about when they saw that. I think that was just, is it hyperbole? Is it a new path? I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's why chairman's in town here next week. We have NCAI here next week. That'll be a big conference. And Ernie, we wouldn't want you anywhere else right now. And just today on his morning walk, he bumped into tribal colleges that were up and early, 8:30 a.m., hitting the hill to go tell everybody about, we can't survive a 90-day pause. The professors need to get paid. The students need to have, you know,
Electricity.
well, yeah. So,
You know what I mean? They need to have
Well,
electricity, they need to have heating, they have teachers, they need to have staff, they need to have, you
right.
know, Chairman Stevens, welcome. Tell us about your meeting.
Oh, okay. Well, tell you what, I'm here because of what's happening around us, and I can't. It's Jason and I do a lot of work going different directions, or from wherever I happen to be to DC. But I needed to be here by the not just by his side, but our entire staff side, our lobby group, our lobbyists that work for the Indian Gaming Association, and then we've had an extensive dialogue with a larger group of lobbyists here in Washington. And that's the strength of what we have. We have a voice, but the voice has to be coordinated by the leadership. And so that next week's a good opportunity to feel the pulse. We have a couple other things going on in our trade show in the spring. Again, the leadership is the ones that have to drive the car here. But as far as that, my things, they say things happen for reasons. I just believe they just happen, and whatever happens happens. But I do believe that God is great. I believe that God is watching over us. And this morning I really felt blessed, because I normally walk a different route. I walk down to the monument, and I bet my back's been a little bit sore, so I cut it short. I just walked the Capitol, that whole circle around, down to the Senate side, down below to the pond, and then back around the front of the Capitol and up the House side. Well, in that walk, I encountered 4 or 5 groups of Native Americans, and I stopped. I'm a talker, so I stopped and talked to each one of them. It took me 2 hours to do a 45-minute walk, because Indian country was all around us, and so I took pictures and I talked with them. But I told them this. I told them that tribal colleges is some of the best education in the whole world, because we get to learn about who we are, where we come from, our culture, our tradition, our language, and at the same time meet the standards that are demanded in every college setting throughout this whole country. So that's what the best of education is. And since there's been gaming in my tribe, we've had good scholarships. Oneidas can go to school any place in this country, but my wife and I, and all 5 of my adult children have gone to tribal college, and we've got a great education. So I told these folks, everyone I talked to, we're talking about outside the Capitol. Capitol's right here next to us, and we're talking about this. And I told them that anything they need from me, I'm an Indian boy from Indian community that had his struggles in life. I got into tribal college with a GED. Maybe some good guesses to get that GED. I never went to school much before that. Tribal colleges not only educated me, but put me on the right path and taught me a lot about life. And there's no way that we can afford to let that be idle in any way, shape, or form. In my day, there was only a couple, but there's tribal colleges all over this country taking care of their communities and providing education. We can't afford to let that be a hit against us. And again, I'm trying to be calm and assertive and substantive with what I do. So I have to control my energy. But this goes right to my heart. My grandmother went to Haskell, in a different day, by the way. But so for me here, we met with our lobby group that works at the Indian Gaming Association, and we've been online with the lot of group of lobbyists, and we're trying to figure things out and try to get. The bottom line for me is that we're calm, assertive, and substantive in what we bring forward, but we have to be here on the front line. And we have to control our emotions, because we have to fight for what's ours, and we have to fight to not let anybody change what works for us. But at the same time, my mother, my grandmother, and my wife, my kids, my grandkids, my children demand that I'm a gentleman, and I will be a gentleman. But I'm prepared to fight for Indian country. That consensus has to come from the leadership. With all due respect, with the beautiful minds that sit here with us today, I think everybody agrees the leadership has to drive this car, and we will feel their pulse.
Well, Chairman, I think one of the things that I've seen, and being your friend for 20 years, when you go to these small reservations, when you go to these, not the pachangas, not the the big ones, but the small ones, when you show up, you provide a real sense of relief that there's somebody at the wheel, and a lot of tribes feel that way. So I've always been honored to call you a friend, and I'm sure those young people and all the people that you met today felt good that they ran into you and that you gave a message of leadership, because I think everyone's feeling rudderless right now, and I think that's really important. So good on you, man. I'm
Yeah,
glad you did that.
they inspire me. I still got goosebumps or tickle in my stomach to be able to see this. I think God brought me to them or them to me. Either way, they got the whole capital circled in a good way.
Good. All right, gentlemen, let me shift this a little bit. Let's talk about what we know. Okay, so you know, so they're talking about Doug Burgum, the governor of North Dakota, to be assistant secretary, or no, to be the new secretary of Interior. I believe he's not done yet. He's still going through. We're waiting for it. Am I correct?
No, I started this
He's done?
week.
He
Yeah,
started. Okay. Yeah, that's right. He's in.
Secretary
Okay.
of
I
went
remember the
in.
Interior.
pictures now. Pictures are in. So he's in now. What now, Doug is interesting. I had a conversation with someone and they're like, when name was first, put out there, it was like, wow, it could have been a lot worse. He could have had Christy Nome, who had a very contentious relationship. But, Doug Burgum has a good relationship with them, unless you talk about online gaming. When the tribes went to him, they wanted to do online gaming. He said, nope, that expands beyond what you're doing, and we're going to kill that. So, he was not very progressive, but he has been kind of protective of tribal rights, Mark, right? He's not the worst that we could do.
He's not the worst, but he's also, again, the broader context is that an energy emergency, even though our energy production is up, there's an energy emergency that he's now implementing, which means if there are resources that they think are important to develop and oil companies or other extractive industries want to do that, they will be a partner to make that happen. If tribes say, no, it's not going to be a barrier in this sense.
Those are like wartime type of powers, aren't they?
They are. They are. I think a couple other things I think, though, is important context with Burgum is that the White House is driving all of this. And even a cabinet level officer is not going to have the same kind of authority that, say, a Deb Haaland had in the past administration, that everything is going to be cleared through the White House and through their prism. And that's going to make it even more difficult. The other thing that I think is really important is that we have a Congress that has an inability to govern. The House has one vote majority. The Senate has more than that. But the ability to get something affirmative passed is going to be extraordinarily difficult. And you're already seeing it with a budget resolution. And that allows a vacuum that the administration can step in and say, well, Congress can't do it, so we're going to do it. And that allows them to just go around and ignore the law.
It's pretty amazing if you listen to some of the talking heads. It's like everybody has become an expert on constitutional law, and they talk about the separations of power and how those walls have really become gossamer thin, especially with the president taking as much power that used to belong to Congress. And so Mark, are you saying the Lumbies are going to have a casino in North Carolina? Is that what you're saying?
It's really interesting. He's so great at backing out on promises. He is not anywhere near fulfilling that promise.
Oh, well, listen,
Yes,
he said one of the first things they did was like give the Lumbee federal recognition. You know what I
Right.
mean? And that goes, what, 35,000, 80,000 tribal members, something like that. It's like, that's a lot of tribal members. You know what I mean? Not a very popular decision in Indian country, but very popular. They think they help them North Carolina. So are they gonna do more expansionists with gaming in North Carolina? I think the tribe obviously wants to have it. Catawbas are trying to get their feet underneath them. That thing's been a mess. The Eastern Band of Cherokees don't want any of that, but they seem to have lost their voice in that political battle. So it'll be interesting to see what that means. But I think we can pretty much safely say that there won't be any land in a trust if we go back to what we saw in 2016 to 2020. no more land in a trust, no more off-reservation gaming. I think I read something the other day that they're talking about going back after the Medford, stuff like that to see if they can crack open that again. And what that means, some of these decisions that the administration made in the last month or two. So, what do you think about that, Mark?
I think you're right in general, but I think the trump card, to use that terrible word, is that if there's a transactional process, it could go around that. For example, if there's an off-reservation investment that involves the Trump Hotel and his son's involved, it might happen anyway. They're not following the rule of law, they're following transactions. And because of that, it's a whole different ballgame in terms of how a strategy can be put together.
So, Jason, do we got to start throwing people down the volcano again? Is that what we got to do?
No, I mean, that's kind of why, the leaders are coming next week. And, that's why Ernie's got requests in to talk to the congressional folks. This is really only 15 days in, and we've got to, last week it was all over this OPM memo, which they rescinded. And now this week it's about education. They'll get to the interior stuff at some point, I imagine. But, Ernie, I don't, it is a little bit unprecedented in that we're used to lobbying one way and going in and getting an audience with our good friends on the Republican aisle. But man, boy, it's crickets out there right now in terms of them pushing back. And that's what the weird thing, Mark, about this whole thing is Congress will keep everything funded, but Trump will just not spend the money and delete the Department of Education, even though he doesn't have authority, and Congress will just sit here silent. I don't understand how this is going to work at the end, Well, go ahead, Ernie. I mean, you could tell them what we've got tribal leaders for, and when they come in, because they are constituents of these folks.
Yeah, I think again we hunker down and we fight smart. We're ladies and we're gentlemen and we're statesmen and stateswomen. We work hard at this thing, and we don't have any. We can't afford to just think it's going to go away. We have to be on the front line, providing the necessary education so that folks understand the supreme law of the land, understand our treaties, understands why we act as governments in Indian country and we're sovereign. These things we have to explain and teach folks and help them understand. And we have to stand by our ground and stand our ground in a good way. And again, as I said, feel the pulse of leadership. I'm looking around my room as we're here in my office here in Washington. I got a picture of Obama here. I got a picture of first George Bush, the late George Bush, when he was president. I've got so many different pictures up here. Got the picture of the Chief Shakopee and then Stan Crooks, John Wooden, who was like a grandfather to me. I got a picture of my father at the Korean War Memorial. His last trips to Washington, my dad did amazing things. And my dad faced these kind of struggles and obstacles in his time in the 60s and 70s here in Washington. So as much as I want to say that it's something that we've had to deal with in the past, I don't want to take it for granted. Because, I got another picture over here on my grandson, Ernest Stevens IV, sitting on my lap. We can't do that no more. Ernie E4 is as big as I am now. And so this next 7 generations we're responsible to. That means we have to be on the front line. And that's why I'm here on the front line, because we have to fight for our next generations, for our grandchildren, and fight immediately for our community. My father passed last June, but before he passed, it's the sovereignty and the gaming dollars and the resources that we have in Indian country that allowed him to be cared for. My father had to be moved with a machine to be fed and to have a social time. They moved him with a machine 3 times a day. That's all he had towards the end of his life. But that was his life. so many elders in our communities just like that throughout the whole country. We got to take care of them. We got to make sure those resources don't go away. And again, my father would be the first to tell you that education is our bottom line and our top priority, and we got to fight for it. So again, we'll do it in a good way. And like I said, we'll do it by feeling the pulse of leadership. So as soon as I get off this here, I'll take this call. I've got a call coming in from the tribal chairman in the Northwest.
Well, I talked to my cousin on Sunday, my cousin Mark Macaro, who's the chairman of Pechanga, but he's also the president of the National Congress of American Indian. And, Mark, um, I know I'm biased, and he's, well, not only my cousin, but he's one of my favorite people. But he's very measured, and he's ready to take this problem on. And I think he's very good at listening to what leadership says and following through. And I think it's very important to have someone, like you and like Mark Macaro, people who are very measured in their response and stuff like that, because we don't know what's coming down the pike. We just know that it's going to be bad. So I think it's very important that we keep our powder dry, and that we keep our heads together, and that we, provide the type of sanity that people are desperately seeking in all this. Now, one of the big news yesterday was on Indians.com. My dear friend AC Agoyo said that William Billy Kirkland is being going to be appointed as Assistant Secretary of the Interior. This isn't done yet. This is kind of interesting. It was done through Department of Energy and not the Department of Interiors. What do we know about Billy Kirkland?
Let me tell you what I know. I know there's probably hundreds of Native American men and women that could do that job, and so my list would be a little bit different. And let me tell you about Billy Kirkland. The bottom line for him is that he's Native and that he's done this job before, and we have to be able to be there to help him do it. If he's sworn in or passes that process, which I'm sure he will because he's been in there before, we have to help him. We have to communicate with him. We have to be patient with him. And so if he's the guy, we're ready to go, and we need him to go to work for Indian country.
Very good. What do you know, Jason?
Well,
I'm interviewing my co-host. What do you know, Jason?
Well,
He's
it's
smarter
sort of
than
like,
me. He's smarter than me. He knows everything.
Well, I mean, Victor, it's and I'll ask Mark, the differences here between, what Ernie was describing when his father was here in the 70s, and then but going back to the 60s. I mean, the Billy Kirkland's, the position he's going to have, those are who Indian country conducts the government to government relationship with, and that's on a daily basis. And, it's great that we have tribal folks in these positions that, by the way, Morton v. Mancarry's U.S. Supreme Court, they said these are not based on race. These are based on our government to government relationship with the Indian tribes, that, we should put people from the reservations, from the areas that are most affected by this relationship, in these political positions, because that's what it is. And so, we know Billy from last time. He's going to be fine. But, again, Mark, this goes to you. Like, how much skin in the game is everyone going to have? It was easy in Vietnam era to protest because people didn't want to be drafted and go die in Vietnam. And it was easy to get people out in the streets. Now you can just sort of run amok through the federal government, and, nobody really cares about U.S. aid, if they even knew what it was. When are people going to get a skin in the game? And it's a shame that, tribes always feel it first, whether it's a government shutdown or, if you're just going to ravage the federal budget. We're hearing the stories already, Mark, and maybe you guys will get those in the paper, but, there were some Alaskan Native language folks that were put on administrative leave just because of their title, just because that's what they do. But, they were, fortunately, they reversed that, but they're literally just going through and looking for anything race-based and then zeroing it out or telling the people not to come to work. That's a scare tactic as much as anything. But the problem is they're not going to have a train of people behind them to generally support them. I mean, that's the dichotomy between now and then is, so far they're getting away with it, frankly. Well, what are you seeing, Mark, in terms of the differences?
There's a lot there. Let me start going back to Ernest Stevens Sr. One of the things that the Nixon administration proposed that they were not successful at was to reduce the federal government to 4 departments. They wanted state, justice, natural resources, and domestic. And the reason that failed is because Congress basically thought, damn, that's a lot of committee chairmanships that we won't have. And a lot of the folks on the Hill decided that was a nutty plan because they were going to lose so much power. And they shot down out. This time around, you don't have that pushback from Congress. Congress is not saying you can't do this and then using their power of purse to kind of be the bridge. One thing that just really, and I also want to mention about education because I think that's really important. After the pandemic, across the board at tribal colleges, at universities, enrollment dropped. And this is the very first year that enrollment is back to normal levels. And it's the first generation of high school graduates that are going into a more normal college experience past the pandemic. And we're about to rip that out for many of them. Whether you have student loans, whether you have grants, all of those are going to be on hold for at least 90 days. And if you're a student trying to go to university and your tuition's due, you might just say to hell with it and back out. And it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of impact it has on universities almost immediately. You know, and this I wrote about on Facebook of all places, but when the pandemic hit, out of the blue, somebody at the Treasury Department sent me a database of all the tribal revenue and payroll. And it's because they were collecting it for that information for the money they were going to help the tribes with. I should have never had that information. Some journalists probably would have wrote about it, but I actually looked at it for about 10 minutes and then deep sixed it and said, this is not my information. This is proprietary. Jason mentioned the kids that are running Treasury now. I can guarantee you that private information is going to start going into the public very, very quickly because they don't know how to handle stuff like that. They have no experience. They have no vetting. And the danger for having very personal private information being part of the public discourse is very, very high at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you can really go down the rabbit hole on that, Mark. But, we have midterm elections coming up. There's so many ways you can influence an election if you've got everyone's private information. And so, I'm glad that those identities were, put out there to show, hey, these are 18 to 21-year-old kids going into agencies, confronting, career service people and, threatening them to have the marshals come and escort them out, which, happened a couple of times. And then some of these folks just up and quit. That's what I mean, Mark. There's not a lot of roadblocks, right? There's no one lying in the street preventing this. And you just don't know how far they can go down and start, taking secrets. They've already gone into the DOD as well. There's got to be sensitive information that could get out there. How do we know China and Russia aren't just hacking these guys' phones while they're in there and just, it's really crazy if you think about it.
Today, the administration released an email with CIA agents' names and email addresses, and it was on a public document.
Wow.
Well,
and that's
look at that.
Trying to get them to retire early, and they just didn't even think about, well, maybe these guys don't even, their identity doesn't need to, yeah. So, yeah.
Well, and look at, we're talking, and also at that, and on a very real level, we've had airplanes falling out of the sky, and accidents, and this big, terrible accident in DC on the first day, and they were practicing evacuations when this happened. They were practicing going from the White House to a mountain in Virginia or something like that when they hit that airplane. So there's some real world consequences for this chaos, and I think the thing to remember, and I think what I'm seeing through all this smoke and stuff is that it's very important that the fight's going to be done at the state level. You know what I mean? If you go, one of the things that when Chairman talked about Haskell's, right before, it's over the summer, they were talking about taking Haskell out of Department of Education and bring it into Kansas and stuff like that. And I thought, wow, that's very big of them. But there's nothing is ever as innocent as it sounds, especially when it comes to tribal schools. So I think that's a real big issue, and I think this all has to be fought at the state level. You have to lobby in South Dakota, you have to lobby in Montana and North Dakota and South Dakota for those schools, or they're going to evaporate. You know.
It's important. It's important to really understand the value of those colleges, because I graduated 40 years ago from Haskell, and but there were hundreds of graduates when I walked that stage. I go to graduation every year at Haskell. There's hundreds of graduates every year walking that stage, and if you take again, my youngest daughter, Dr. Lois Stevens, she went to tribal college. She went to, tribal daycare all the way through tribal grade school, tribal high school, and she flourished in her grad program and her PhD studies because she's smart. Indian education is a quality that helps us to be not just intelligent about day-to-day life, but our history and the world around us. Tribal college education is the best, and I don't take anything from any of these big universities out there. I know that I respect them, and they do have good Indian programs within them. But I'm a tribal college guy, and we have to keep grinding there. We have to protect them.
Yeah, I agree. It's a priority. And so gentlemen, let's do a little prognosticating a little bit here, which I know is kind of insane and stuff. But so I think what we're looking here, what does this mean for tribal gaming, Mark? What do you think it means for tribal gaming?
I think short term, I think you're right that the relationship with states is going to be key. And one of the things that just blows me away about some of that relationship is in states where tribal gaming is a large employer, there are states that don't treat it as such. They'll go out of their way like crazy to bring a Microsoft in, but they won't lift a finger to help tribal gaming. And I think somehow that argument needs to be reversed, that the power of the employment is really important. And I think Chairman Stevens was right too, because tribal colleges are great employers. And you look at a community like Fort Belknap in Montana, it is the major job on the tribal community. And stressing employment, I think, is really going to be an argument that can be worked in a lot of communities.
Yeah, and go ahead.
Go ahead. I just read that Red Cloud, the former Red Cloud University, is a Lutheran-run college. How trouble is that? How big trouble are those guys? Sorry, I should be laughing about it, but that statement last week that the Lutherans are a money laundering operation was one of the most insane things I've ever. I don't even know where that comes from. You know what I mean? I think we have to go back to Martin Luther. Didn't we talk about? We were talking about Martin Luther when we were in Barcelona. We had a big old conversation about Martin Luther. Because that's what we do. You know, so, I think that was insanity to hear that, which will, affect a lot of colleges and in Minnesota and stuff like that, where there's real big Lutheran stuff. So, when you see insanity like that, who knows what's coming next. So again, I think it's very important that we, keep our powder dry. We don't chase every, shot, every aspersion, that we just focus on the things that are going to affect us right away,
And Ernie, we've got we're a gaming outfit, and we're, Indian gaming advocacy group, and it's definitely proven to be the economic driver of a lot of tribal economies. But, we have a burgeoning illegal market out there with these sweepstakes games, and that's a problem. And if you're gutting the DOJ at the same time, that makes us worried. And by the way, Ernie, we haven't had a chairman of the NIGC in over a year. And, that's a shame. I don't know what the Biden folks were thinking, but, it's a tough deal. And who wants to come to work for the federal government now?
Thanks,
the first thing the first thing you do when you get in there is, you have to keep your mouth shut and your head down and figure out where all this is going.
Yeah, Sorry about that. I think that again, it's calm, assertive, yet substantive. That's what we have to do out here on the front line. We have to hunker down and fight smart and deal with this. That's the only thing we can do. And because if we get out there, it's just like I'm an ex-fighter. I'm a former amateur and professional fighter. If you get out there and start throwing haymakers, that's a good way to get knocked out. But you gotta throw something. That nice hard left jab. You got to start throwing those and moving around the ring and figuring this out. That's what we have to do. It's imperative. And they have to know this stuff. A lot of stuff these folks don't know. You have no idea that we have 300 plus direct jobs in Indian gaming, and that number doubles when you include the offshoot business. They have no idea that we're a $41.9 billion industry, in spite of what the pandemic did to our industry. So what they have to appreciate is that if folks are going to try to come after us, they're coming after America, because half of those 700,000 employees are non-Indians that work, that educate, are work and put their kids through college in our industry. They've been able to thrive in our industry. So we're all in this together. They have to really appreciate that those jobs and the things we're doing is not just about taking care of our elders and our community. We take care of a lot of folks that go with and beyond of the reservation boundaries.
Yeah, listen, Sharon Stevens is spot on, man. We have to go back to the fundamentals, start talking about the job creation, start talking about the revenue that goes into the local communities, and really go back to the fundamentals, which is what we used to do 20 years ago. When there would be commercials in California from San Manuel talking about the contribution that tribes make to the local communities and stuff like that. I think in you just had these big fires. The tribes were very much involved with their fire trucks and their contributions and their money and hotel rooms and all that stuff. And I think we have to go back to the fundamentals again and to remind people the impact it has on tribal gaming, especially at the state level, because I think at the Fed level, we're going to be fighting a big fight. Now, another issue is that I think, you're not going to see another West Flagler for a while. You're not going to get the kind of support that the Seminoles had on that case all the way to the Supreme Court and stuff like that. I don't think you will see that again. So I think you will see companies trying to take another swing at the tribes, try to keep them on the reservation. I think, Jason, you talked about the threats of sweepstakes, prediction betting. In California, they're worried about online gaming coming. It's here. Yesterday, I saw, I think Fliff is expanding into online casinos. So any idea that they're just, non-gaming, they're buying into this. It's a casino. They're going for it. It's money. They don't care. They see the Trump administration as an opportunity to be lawless. And I think that's why it's important that it comes down to the state level. Yesterday, Maryland came out and said they're going to make it a crime, that if you're involved and they're going after your license, and that's what we want to see more of it. The sweepstakes and promotional gaming people were screaming like stuck pigs yesterday, because of that. So you'll start seeing more of that. We're going to be working on that. I think it's very important that this isn't the time to go on autopilot. It's very important that you're active and you're involved. We're also seeing, a slowdown in gaming in Las Vegas. You're seeing some of the other markets, Atlantic City's getting chewed up with online gaming. So we need to be protective of the gains that we have made. And we're going to be playing defense, and we're going to have to remember to play offense too. Like Chairman said, it takes good defense to fight, and so either you ought to keep your hand up, or you're going to be the rope-a-dope against the ropes too. But you got to. We're not rope-a-dopes. We're not rope-a-dopes.
Hey, Victor, I think it's important to appreciate that we just got back from Barcelona. And telling the world that Indian country is ready to do business, and so I'm not a big fan of telling people to. Let me put it this way: I like home on the reservation, okay, but there's so many other things that we can do with and beyond gaming, and that's what we're trying to tell the world. And I think right here at home is a good time. If there's anything that this new administration should be doing, is doing where their strength should lie, being who the president of the United States says that it should be in business. Let's figure out a way to build business in Indian country. Let's figure out a way to do partners, not just with our neighbors, but the world around us. These are the kind of things we should be focusing on. And these are the things that I would call on the new administration to help us do.
Well, and Chairman, in that vein, we're doing a energy conference at IGA, and we're looking at, I think we're prescient to enough to understand is that, we're not going to be looking at windmill, we're not looking at stuff, we're looking at actionable stuff we believe this administration is going to be doing, and we think there's tribes that can take advantage of these opportunities. There's still a lot of there's still a lot of opportunity out there. And I think that's what we're trying to bring to Indian country and the tribes to say, hey, listen, energy is something that you need to be paying attention to. So we're excited about that. And I think that's something that dovetails with the administration.
Yeah. Mark, how much, we'll wrap it up here, but I mean, we're going to need our newspapers because really the only reason anyone's finding out about a lot of this stuff is because of reporting. And it's, and now the White House in the press room now they're inviting like influencers and credentialing them as media, and they're trying to diminish traditional media. Are you seeing any? Are you afraid? I mean, at some point, FCC, they're already making waves about going after late night show hosts for doing jokes about the president, and at some point. When does the media start to be in focus here?
Well, the media is definitely in focus. And I should say I'm no longer at ICT, so I have to add that perspective.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, but yeah.
It's okay.
But you know what it's like to report on stories that are going to piss people off.
Already, though, the financial pressure is starting to grow. For example, last year at the end of the Biden administration, the Corporation for Public Broadcast pulled back their support for the ICT newscast. And part of their fear was that when the Republicans come to town, they're going to use examples like that to wipe them out. I think the Corporation for Public Broadcast is at risk, and that would mean impact on National Public Radio. It would mean impact on public broadcasting in pretty profound ways. That they'll survive, but it'll be very different. Mm-hmm. One of the grants ICT has had is a 5-year grant to do climate change reporting. And I was actually the lead on that when we were doing it. And that grant has been put on hold. And ICT, and that's $250,000 a year that paid for 2 reporters. So I think the financial pressures on the media are going to be significant in addition to the access issues. It's kind of different for Indian country because we never did have access to the White House or other places. We always had to go on the side door. And that hasn't changed in this administration. And the good thing is that as long as there's a photocopy machine or more than 3 people in the meeting, somebody's going to talk. So we just have to keep at them.
Right.
Well, Mark, you know what? I think, I have to say, what you left, your legacy at Indian country, I think will be there a long time. We're used to taking the hits and the struggle and stuff like that. And I just went to my friend AC Agoyo's website, and, AC and the team over there are doing a phenomenal job at the grassroots level in DC, showing up at the meetings. ICT is important. And I'm in conversation about bringing some reporters in for pachanga.net to cover the space too. So, you just have to step up and create it if it's not there. But that's what we do in Indian country. So, listen, we're at the end of our time. Listen, everyone, thank you so much. We apologize for the beginning. We just wanted you to put that little fear into your heart on what it feels like to be left out. But we appreciate you guys being here. Chairman Stevens, thank you so much. You have your job cut out for you. I'm very proud that you're in the position you are. You do a great job, and I know you will provide the leadership that Indian country needs. Mark Trahant, my friend, you've left an incredible legacy in the Indian country of truth, honesty, and reporting where it needs to be, shining those bright lights in dark places. So we really appreciate what you're doing, Mark. Again, pay attention to pachanga.net, Indian Country Today, Indians.com. There's other resources out there. We're still here for you. And we will be in next week. We'll probably be talking about the conference. So session submissions, we're almost done. I'm sure people want some answers. So we're working really hard to that. But this will be the
Gotcha.
beginning of more conversations. We're not going anywhere. We'll be right here trying to illuminate the path for all of us. So thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you guys next week. Okay. Bye.